David, how are you? Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hey Dave, how are things? Thanks very much for having me, man.
All good, all good. So obviously, David, I know you a while now. I know that you have a very interesting story. A lot of ups and downs and stuff. So I kind of wanted to get into that and talk to you about that. So can you take me back kind of to the beginning, say when you were growing up and stuff? Because I know that was a very different time for you than it is now.
Yeah, I suppose rare the countryside and come from a farming background, dairy, milk and dairy cows. We also own the pub as well. So very busy lifestyle, probably an awful combination when you think about it. Early mornings, late starts, but extremely hard working. So I suppose everything's surrounded around the table. So, like, my mother's an extremely good cook, unfortunately, for my way earlier days. But really, the big thing was we used to eat a nice bit, milk with the dinner, butter with everything, milk with every meal. And that was cow's milk as well, which is good stuff. Like, like, naturally enough, I was quite heavy, well, a little bit heavy. I was stocky, I was well built, I suppose, in a way of strong lad, just from farming. And I guess the biggest thing for me was like we were playing GA all along and I was working, so I kind of kept it down, but ate like a horse, like being quite honest, and just worked hard for it. But I think the biggest thing was, coming into, I suppose, secondary school, I always played prop forward. So I suppose the first thing for me, I always felt like I had a feeling of acceptance and playing prop. I was a little bit heavier than the other guys and I had a position. So I always felt like I had that place of acceptance. So, the big thing for me, I didn't feel like, that I was overweight, or I didn't feel like I shouldn't be this weight, for example, because I felt like as part of the team, I was doing my job, and it just took that away. And I guess, I suppose the biggest thing, my safe place is food, always has been. So if I was ever like, let down, or, just say I didn't make the team, I'd always kind of turn to food a little bit. So that was kind of my safe place. And I've only that awareness now. I never had that awareness back then, obviously. So, like, I guess throughout them years, I always ate well, I always ate a lot, but always kind of kept to kind of, I suppose, around 15, 16 stone throughout my rugby days and secondary school days. So, like, I suppose I never really the first kind of big realization to kind of see that, maybe the answer to be this weight was starting going out in the school night outs, for example, and experiencing like the girls not being really interested in the forwards, like, they're always going to the backs with the six packs, whatnot. And like that was the first kind of, I suppose, experience for me to say, right, Joe, maybe this is not the answer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. And just to go back then to what you were saying about your family and stuff, because I feel like that is a very big, not issue, but it's something that a lot of people have to deal with. Is they might want to be in shape, or they want to get into the gym, or they want to start exercising, but the family environment just doesn't support that. So, like, what would you say to people who are in that situation, especially young people who are in school and stuff? When you don't have your own income, and like you're just kind of relying on eating what's in the house, eating the dinners your mom makes you. It can be very hard to kind of get out of this situation. So, what would you say to people in a situation like that?
Being quite honest, Dave, like, being that age, we all don't know the difference, right? So I think the biggest thing is just having the awareness of what's good and bad. I think, like, if we all knew, and it's a disaster way, we should be taught this in school, being quite honest, on nutrition, like, that if we all knew what's actually good and bad for us, instead of just kind of saying, oh, we can have a little bit of that, but it'll be okay, but we end up eating too much of it, or, like, the killer for me was like the pints of milk with every meal, like breakfast, dinner, supper, every meal. And that's like maybe 2 pints. And that's like a fucking meal in itself. Like, so, like, not realizing that, it's having the small little things and the little basic things that we kind of say, right, portion size, and, just watch what we eat, eat the good stuff. The good stuff when you're growing is never going to do anything bad for you. You're growing at the end of the day, but just don't overdo it. Like, I think we just kind of, working from that lifestyle, working throughout the day and then working late at night as well, it was always, on the move, but it was extremely, I suppose, hard going, if that makes sense. So we ate because of it, ate more because of it. And truthfully, Dave, like, my weight always kind of stayed at a standstill throughout that, because I was so active, and that was the biggest thing, so even though we ate quite a lot, and I was, a little bit overweight, being honest, if you looked at me that time, it would just have been, geez, he's solid, like, bit of weight, but
Yeah.
he's solid. Like, and that's the truth, like, you know. And it's just having that awareness, you know, when you are younger, it's extremely important. So if you don't have that activity like I had, and you're, you know, just playing a bit of soccer, a bit of GA on the side, just have that awareness is probably the biggest thing to know. You know, maybe I should just watch what I eat a little better, you know. And I think there's so much education there now, and we have social media, which, you know, it's a good thing and a bad thing in some ways, but you have this education, you know, in front of you now at your fingertips, really, for anyone growing
Absolutely.
up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like a big thing with that is for parents to understand like what's good and what's bad, you know, because like growing up, I'm sure there's loads of foods, like as you were saying with the points of milk and stuff, like he probably just associated milk with being good for you. You know what I mean? Not
Yeah.
understanding how much like calories and stuff were in it. And there's a lot of foods like that. So yeah, no, that's a really, really good point. So coming up, you were saying then with coming towards when you were kind of in school and stuff like that, like you were a forward in that and the girls didn't have much interest. Like talk me through that a little bit. Like how did that feel?
Like, I suppose that first experience and kind of having that, not having that attention was a bit of an eye opener. And, you know, it was something that we couldn't really talk about because, you know, you're at that age, you have a bit of pride there, you know, we're not that open, we're lads at the end of the day, you know, this. So like, you kind of kept it to yourself, and I kind of kept that to myself, you know, where I kind of, instead of saying anything, I kind of comfort it a little bit because of it, being quite
Mm.
honest, you know, because I
Yeah.
felt down, I was down myself, you know, because of it. And I was like, Jesus, that is not the answer, you know, but, or, you know, maybe this weight is not the answer, you know. So that was kind of the first inkling. But, you know, when you have a position playing on the road pitch, playing senior cup rugby, like, you know, you felt like you're part of something. So that was the biggest thing. And that was the first eye opener where you're like, oh, you know, when I get out of college, or if I stop playing rugby, like, I'm going to have this problem, you know.
Mm.
And that kind of made me kind of very, very edgy, to be honest. And I ate more because of it.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Do you feel like you fed into the whole you know, being a rugby player and, you know, keeping up appearances and stuff like that? When you're growing up, because like when you're in school, you know, like being good at sports and stuff like that kind of makes you stand out from the crowd and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, like 100%. I think, like, I guess even looking back now is like, you know, always being a little bit heavier than others and being kind of the blocky lad, or, you know, he's strong from farm work and whatnot, like, is,
Mm.
you know, even playing GA at the time was always kind of, GA was a bit of an eye opener as well, where, because you are a little bit bigger and you're not, everyone's kind of a lot smaller than you. And
Mm.
when I started playing rugby, that's when I felt I had acceptance. So it just made it easier, if that makes sense. You know,
Yeah.
and like you say, growing up being a part of that, then you buy into that as well. And, you know, then you've others at the same, roughly around the same size, you're like, all the other forwards, and you're like, well, we have our place. Like, so we're safe, you know? And it
Yeah.
just gives you that level of safety, being honest. And sure, we didn't know the difference at the time, but that's the truth of it, like, you know.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And going forward, then, like after school, like, how long did this carry on for? When?
Like, I suppose in January 21st, 2010, my life changed. I was actually in fifth year at the time, still playing seniors cup rugby. My sister tragically passed away in an accident at 19 years of age, and that turned my life upside down, to be quite honest. You know, I guess the biggest thing here for me was like the whole rest of fifth year was, and sixth year, being honest, was just kind of coasting, like living on a cloud, being quite honest. And, you know, looking back now, is teachers wouldn't say anything to you because they felt sorry for you and you're just doing nothing. You know, I wasn't doing anything, they wouldn't say anything because of it. And, you know, there was a time where at the end of the summer of when I finished school, but I didn't even go to school much in the rest of the fifth year, being quite honest. And I was actually going to do an apprenticeship. I was leaving school, you know, and in fairness to my parents, they actually put me into boarding, 5-day boarding back there. And, you know, I'm so thankful for it now, because I would have left and my life would have been a little bit different. So I'm forever thankful for that. But I'll just tell you where the mindset was. You know, grief is an incredibly hard thing, and it can affect, and it affects everybody. This is not a feel sorry story for me. It affects everybody. It comes to everyone's doorstep. Everyone has misfortune, you know. So like we could always go down a bad route, like where, you know, you can go down to drink, drugs, you know, gambling. You can always go down a bad route. And for me, like, I kind of turned more to food, being quite honest, you know. And believe it or not, cars. Like,
Mm.
I was probably the guy that your mother and father had been giving out as blackening the local crossroads. Like, that was
Yeah,
me, right? But
yeah,
I'm very thankful for it, because it masked that energy for me, You know, I
Yeah.
ate and I bought and sold cars and I done up cars, and that just literally maxed all the energy for me. And that grief helped so much, and it helped me keep keeping away from the bad things, being quite honest. And that's just the truth of it.
Yeah. Wow. I'm sorry to hear that. How thinking back now, how do you think that changed you as a person?
I guess, there's years there that it feels I can't even remember them, because it was just like I was just floating, man. And that's the truth. Uh, till I went into I done leaving cert, and the leaving cert actually went quite well, thank God. And I ended up going to college in UCC at the time, and everything went extremely well, as in not extremely well, but everything went as it should, if that made sense. I didn't drop out, or I was bettering myself in a way, but I was just kind of floating more than anything. Like, it was, I got jumped into a college course in UCC, done environment science, which I wanted to kind of go down the route of agriculture at the time, because that's the background we have. And Jesus, I was in this course after like 5 or 6 months, like, what the heck is this? Like, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I dropped out. But like, I guess the biggest thing for me as well throughout that whole period was I turned to food an awful lot more, right? And there was a time, like, my buddy will be listening to this now, that I live with one of my best friends in accommodation UCC, and like he used to go to college, and I used to say, oh, I have a lecture there at 11, so he used to be gone at 9, and I used to stay home for the day and actually binge eat. Like, I used
Okay.
to eat my feelings, and that actually spiraled my weight to going up to like 22 stone, like 138 or 136 kilos, because I was just, and that was my kind of safe place. Because looking back now, food was always my safe place, and when no one was around me, that was like when I could do that, if that made sense. So I was just
Yeah.
eating my feelings, more than anything when I was in college.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And stuff like that it really can have such a huge impact. And as you said, like, you probably don't even realize it at the time. You're just kind of floating through. Like, I remember when I was in sixth year, getting ready for my leaving cert, my mum was diagnosed with cancer, and I remember
Jeez.
just that feeling of, feeling numb. Like that.
Yeah,
That's kind of how I go in a situation like that. It's just numb,
yeah,
and I remember like not understanding it and thinking back on it, and I felt guilty because, like, at the time I was like, I don't actually feel sad. I don't feel happy. I don't feel, you know what I mean? It was nothing. Like, I just
yeah,
felt empty
nothing.
inside it. And it was like that for months. And as you said, it was just kind of like floating through. And when I think back on that time, you do think that in times like that, like, they'd be kind of the standout points of your life. But I'm the same. I have very little kind of memory of that
Yeah,
stage in my life. How do you, like, so everyone obviously reacts differently to things like this, and as I said there, like, I just went completely numb and whatever. But you know, as you said, some people spiral out of control. Some people, you know what I mean, they put on a brave face. What was your reaction to this?
like, you described it perfectly. Like, when I say floating, it's literally like just being numb. Life is
Yeah.
just passing by, days are going by, people are, you're interacting with people, but there's nothing going in really. Like,
Mm.
and you're just, for me, like, all along, like, being quite honest, like, I was the kind of the bowel one in the family. Like, I was the one fucking driving quad bikes up and down the road, and girls calling out, and I was the bowel one, right? And
Mm.
driving at a young age and whatnot. And I showed my sister how to drive in the farm and stuff. And I was like, why not? Why me? Why wouldn't it be me that was taken? Like, why was it her? Like, and that kind of went, for a long time. I was always kind of fixated with that. Always.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand it. And you know, it was extremely hard. And like you said there, the biggest thing, and like, I suppose the most incredible thing out of it all was really like how looking back, how I kind of turned and masked it without even knowing it. Like you
Mm.
said, people can actually spiral out of control. And I spiral out of control with food, which is, I'm extremely thankful for at the moment. Now,
Mm.
like, because, right, I put the weight on, that's fine. But like, if you go down a bad road, it can be like, can literally ruin your life in a way. And you
Yeah.
might say putting on that weight ruined my life, but no, it wasn't. It was a lesson. It's a
Yeah.
lesson to where I am now, and that's the truth of it. And life works in crazy ways. So yeah, like, everyone has their path, I think, and it's all
Absolutely.
the way I look at it. Like, everything's aligned for us. It
Hmm.
really is. And I hate saying this, but maybe some things have to happen for you to move forward. And that's, I can only say that now. Fuck it, I couldn't say that a couple of years ago, and that's the truth of it.
Exactly. Yeah, I know. I agree with you 100%. And like looking back on certain situations, like what can seem like the end of the world at sometimes, not that it was a good thing, but you can look back on them and realize how much of a pivotal moment in your life it was, and how much that situation shaped you who you are today. Now, all that is obviously much easier. It's easy to say when we're in a position now, and even knowing this and then going through something again, like that's not where your mind goes. It's just it just feels like shit. But there is, I suppose, positives to be taken from any situation. I think, it was the same with my skin and stuff. When that was going through, it was just the worst thing in the world at the time. But looking back on how much it shaped me as a person now, and how much lessons I learned from that, and yeah, look, so yeah, do you feel that your relationship with your family changed? How was that whole situation?
Like, to be quite honest, like, grief can make or break a family, right? That's the truth of
Mm,
it, and thankfully we're probably closer than most families now because of it, and different generations is always different ways of dealing with things, like, so at the time, we're out of farming now. The motorway, the Cork Dublin motorway came through us at the time. Was a resulting of splitting our farm in two, and ended up getting out of farming. So
mm,
we're out of farming, and my father used to work abroad overseas, and he got offered a job over there, and he actually went over there maybe in 2011. And that, being quite honest, the older generation, that's the way they deal with it. They work.
yeah.
They mess, like, even for me, like, I massed my energy in cars, worked on cars, etc. And that was his way. And
Mm,
looking back, it was really, a blessing for us, because myself, my brother, and my mother, we used to always go out there every summer, and I used to work like a dog there for 16 weeks, driving machinery, tax free, and it was like an excitement for us during that whole period. When I look back at them years, Dave, like, that was the exciting part, was actually getting out of this environment, coming away from the house, coming away from the memories, passing her room, at that time was absolutely a godsend, so I'm forever grateful for that. And like,
mm,
the biggest thing is, like, just being able to, we're closer because of that. And
mm.
the world works in crazy ways, and we're probably, a lot of people would probably say we're extremely close, like, where I often get my friends saying, geez, Dave, you're so lucky,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
but look, these things happen because it can make or break someone, and it really made our family, being quite honest.
Good. I'm delighted to hear that, man. Yeah, because that, like, I can only imagine how what something like that is like to go through. But as we spoke about there before, there's always positives that can be taken from these situations. Do you look at life differently, or do you like value life differently after experiencing something like that?
Oh, absolutely, man. Like, you often hear stories of, families, falling out over money and different things, and fuck money, man. Life is so
Mm,
precious, and I think you have to really, lose someone to know that, so my
mm,
whole values is not money driven. It's about enjoying the process, and, you know, sharing, like, as much as I can from my own personality, and sharing that, more positivity, and even for me, being able to help as many people as I can, on the journey I'm on now, because I can always, resonate with some people that what they're going through as well, so
mm.
absolutely, man, 100%.
Yeah, yeah. And just last thing I'm going to ask about this now. For anyone who might be listening, who might have experienced something like that, you never know what's going on. What would you kind of say to those people, and from the lessons you've learned from looking back on that situation? What would you say to someone who might be going through something like that? Or yeah.
Truthfully, like, being quite honest, this will probably be a long-winded answer, but, I had to kind of hit rock bottom before I could actually move forward, if that makes sense. So, like,
Absolutely.
at a young lad at 20 years of age, at the time, 22 stone, I was accepting not having a girlfriend in life, where
Mm,
I'm at the peak. 20 should be a real enjoyable life. I was accepting, like, I was like, oh, I have my cars, I have my friends, and, like, being quite honest, Dave, like, from being reared in a pub as well, I talk to the fucking wall, like, being quite honest,
mm,
right? So I had a lot of friends that are males, and a lot of men's or friends that are females, and, like, even some of my male friends that were, in shape or whatever, didn't have even female friends. So, like, I was like, like, I don't need anything here, like, and
mm,
that was the mindset at the time. And I guess the biggest change for me was going when I was in college, going on the nights out, for example. I used to, as you know, in college, everyone goes out at the end of the night to go to the club and everyone tries to pull, and that's where my confidence was absolutely shot. So like it kind of started to become a habit where, I started kind of, saying that I got too drunk, or I met one of the lads and I went home. So I used to always like disappear like 12 o'clock. And then eventually went to a place where, I got the nickname of Dodging Dave, to be quite honest, right? With my friends, but sure, they didn't know the difference, right? But, the biggest experience for me was coming home in the taxi by myself, right? Coming home, sitting on the bed and, being so upset with life. Like that was the biggest kind of, I get the awareness where, I started even making excuses to start socializing with my friends that time in college. It got so bad because I felt so low at the time and so bad with myself. They're like, what are you doing? You don't have the confidence. And I just wanted to avoid it. So I started even going out less even. And I guess when any night I used to go, you see even get worse. So I remember one night, and this is kind of gave me the kind of realization to change, was I was coming home, I felt awful, I sat at the end of the bed again. And, I kind of sat there, and I was very close to my sister, like, so there was only a year and a half between us. So we used to talk about, like, throughout the years, girl things as well. And, she said I used to lean on me for things as well. And we were extremely close. And I just sat there and I was like, what would she think if she was here sitting there telling her how you felt? She'd be extremely upset. And like from then on, I was like, you know what, this has to change. And from then on, I just changed it. And that's actually what drives me today. That's what still drives me. Like, it's just to make that lady proud. And that's just the truth of it. And that's after ricocheting of every aspect of my life, not just weight loss. At the start, it was just weight loss and, going to that extremity of, just pushing. And the end goal, that was my why, So just telling other people that are like experiencing that, they can take something away from that. You kind of have to always sit with yourself and say where you're at, if you're going through grief, and there's always a better way out, and that's the truth of it. But sometimes you will have to hit rock bottom. So if you are rock bottom, that was my realization. It doesn't have to be that realization. That's extremely vulnerable, I know, but that's the truth, right? And you have to be real with yourself and just start like changing your habits a little bit. If it's alcohol, if it's drugs, don't be afraid to get help. Don't be afraid. There's people out there that have experienced very similar, and that's why I like portraying my story on my socials and stuff, because there's people listening to it and they're like, geez, he's talking to me. And they're the people I love fucking helping, Dave. Like, they're the people I want to be part of their journey, not the people, not the person that wants abs for Ibiza. Like, that's just the truth of it, and that's what I'm about, being honest. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great answer, Bud. And I can draw a lot of similarities from that. Like, I with my coaching and stuff as well. Like, my background is kind of like mental health problems, things like that. So, I rather working with people who are struggling with that rather than the people who want an 8-week transformation. But one thing you said there that stood out to me is, when you're at rock bottom, like, so that feeling of being at rock bottom, it can feel like your whole world is ending, but the only way is up from there. Like, when you're in that position, and like, I think it's only after being there a few times you realize that, that's something I kind of tell myself now when I do feel like I'm at rock bottom. It's like, right, I've been here before, you know what I mean? But I've also come out of it, and good times last, bad times last. But I think
Absolutely.
how you handle yourself in those situations is so important. Now, I'm not saying to, like, you're not allowed to kind of grieve or take some time to kind of like let the situation process or anything like that, but you have a choice of whether you can, as you said, turn to things like drugs or drinking or gambling or these kind of things, or you have a choice if you want to kind of be productive with the situation and move up. And I think that those times when you are at rock bottom, that is when the most personal development can happen. It's when you can figure out the most about yourself, because you are forced to have these painful conversations with yourself, which I think a lot of people avoid. And when you are having these conversations with yourself, you can really kind of break down what's going on and why you're feeling like you're feeling. Because I think in life, when you are just kind of coasting through, it can be very easy to how to describe it? Like you don't understand what's going on. You're
Yeah,
just kind of going with the flow, going with the motion, and you don't actually stop to think. But when you are in a situation like that, you are forced to stop and think about these things. And yeah, like you can do a lot of good in those situations. Like, and it doesn't have to be trauma or whatever. It's the same with, like, I see it the whole time with breakups. I'm sure you
yeah,
feel you see it with clients as well. Clients
yeah,
coming to you, and they're just after going through a breakup and stuff, and they feel like they're at rock bottom. But that's when you see the most change in people. You know what I mean? And like I
100%.
definitely see it when someone is kind of in a situation like that. Like the difference in someone like that in the space of 8 weeks compared to someone who, as you said, is just looking to get a six pack or whatever. The changes are night and day between them. But yeah, no, look, that was a really interesting conversation. Thank you for sharing that with me.
100%.
So coming on then, after that, you said you turned to eating. You went up to 138 kilos. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah.
So how long how long did that take? Like how yeah.
I think, like, being truthfully honest, like we're saying that we can coast for a while. It took me 4 years of literally being numb, being honest, before I actually started doing anything. So the weight gain, not as much in 6 year, maybe a little bit, but we're still playing schools rugby, so that was a great, way to mask it more than anything. But college was the big thing. College was a big one for me because it was the first time there where I had no responsibility. Like, when you're even in the boarding school, like, you such camaraderie with your friends, you could actually talk to them about these things as well, and you're together in a dorm, and you're friends for life there, which is unbelievable, being quite honest. But when you go to a college, your first time living away from home, and like I said, home wasn't my safe place for food.
Mm,
So when I got by myself, that emotional side of them got triggered, and as well as that, as well, being honest, my father leaving as well, working abroad, I felt like, my dad was gone as well. And, throughout the years, I worked every evening with him. I spent all the time with him, so I felt like I lost him as well, if that made sense. So
of
that
course.
kind of triggered way more, even though we're talking fucking more or less every day and stuff, but it does affect you. And I'm just being totally honest about it. College, just eating to myself. I wasn't even like socializing, drinking. That was a bit of it, but it was more the food more than anything.
Mm,
I'd never say that the drink caused it, or partying caused it, because it's just, I didn't go out crazy maybe once a week. It's a normal college thing. People go 2 or 3 times a week in college when they start
yeah.
their first year. Like, so it was really food, and just
Mm,
masking that with food, and wait till everybody was gone. And that was my safe place then. And
yeah.
didn't know at the time, know it now. So that's the thing. 100%.
Yeah.
College was,
And
that year was massive.
do you remember what it felt like to be at that weight? Like
Oh,
what?
100%.
So like physically being in the the situation you are now and looking back on the situation then, what were the differences?
So I'll give you a perfect example. Like I said, being at that weight, mindset, accepting where I was, I always had the positive side in a weird way where, I can accept it. I didn't need a girlfriend. Except, for example, I had my friends, my cars, blah, blah, blah. Right. But when I dropped out of UCC that time, I came back and we still had the cows when the motorway was coming through us. I actually went farming for, a full term nearly, from maybe just the 6 months before we got rid of him. And being that weight, from being constantly like moving on the farm and stuff and working, Jesus, like, that was an eye opener for me. Being out of breath, couldn't do the same stuff that I was doing, even though in maybe a short space of time, that changed. It was just the weight gain throughout the months, like in that maybe college year, was crazy. Like, and like, I thought, Jesus, now I'm being I'm more active, whatnot, that I'll drop some of the weight. And truthfully, Dave, I didn't, because working with cars in the evening, so I used to farm during the day and I used to work in cars in the evening, and that used to be like takeaways in the evening, working late. And it's still kind of, I was still masking my food and cars. As like, that's kind of gave me the mindset, like, I don't need anything. I'm working away,
Mm,
making a few pounds, buying, selling cars, doing what I love. That was the acceptance. That's where the mindset that was at. And it's actually, it's fucking crazy to be at that mindset at 20 years of age. And there's people have that mindset, and it's crazy looking back now, where I compare to where I am now. Like, when I think about that, I'm like, hell, like, that's absolutely nuts. Like, you know, just from a physical standpoint and a mindset standpoint more than anything.
Yeah, I think like a lot of people, they hold very low standards for themselves, and when you hold low standards for yourself, you can't expect to do great things if you don't believe you can do great things. And like whether that's losing weight or starting a job or whatever. But obviously it's very easy for us to look back on it and kind of see it, but you see it a lot with clients and stuff like that. People don't realize their full potential. And yeah, like that's just mad. What what sorry, what was the like say body dysmorphia? That was the word I was trying to look for there. Sorry. When you were kind of coming out of that phase, like how long did it take you for that to come around, for that to change?
So like when I think about body dysmorphia, really, like it's more the mindset. So like I lost 8 stone in 15 months, which is crazy in a way, but no one would stop me. Like when I changed that mindset, and it's like, I guess at that time I had a wicked all or nothing approach. So anything I put my hands to, like, was the cars at the time, I give it everything. It was 100 miles an hour, right? Same thing with weight loss, and it was because I had the why. I was like, I'm making that lady proud. I'm driving on. But the biggest experience for me was, you know, I was saying no to every social occasion. I was putting myself first, eating feck all, just not doing any gym, just doing cardio sessions and spinning classes a week. I'll never forget it, like 800 calories a day. And I dropped that. And I guess the biggest thing for me after losing the 8 stone, I was looking in the mirror, and I actually felt like I looked worse than when I was, because I had an awful lot, being quite honest, I had an awful lot of loose skin at the time. And because I'd done things wrong, because I didn't know any different at the time. And, a big thing as well was like, just trying to say, right, where do I go from here? And I felt a little bit let down. Being honest, it's like, fuck it, you're after working so fucking hard and you look like, but don't get me wrong, that's just the deep feeling of it, like the surface level stuff. Yeah, coming from a 40-inch waist down to a 32-inch waist pants was massive. Like, going from a double or triple XL t-shirt down to a medium was massive. Like that's the surface level stuff, if you ask me. That's the field, and having a lot more, everything more organized, like it replicated everything off my life, because you had structure. I had structure, and at the time I was still doing ag science course at the time, and everything got better. Where before I'm very cool, I'm very easygoing, like, so, but it came very, I was very resilient in these things. So I kind of like it ricocheted off everything in my life, relationships, college, work, etc. Kind of just that structure alone. So there was so many positives from it. But deep down, Joe, when you did the real inner stuff, I felt like I was disappointed where I was. So it was always kind of give that mindset to, go harder, like, you need to work harder, like, to get there. And that's where I was extremely came to that, like, for years, like that whole like hypercritical, mindset, where it was never good enough, and that's the truth. And I guess that was probably the biggest understanding for me. Like, and even though like people used to come to me, like, Dave, like, Jesus, you fucking, people used to come to me and say, Jesus, you sick? Like, what's after happening? Like, like they actually thought that I was actually ill, like, because I lost weight so quickly. And they're like, oh, mind blown by it. And I was like, yeah, thanks very much. But like, it was actually in one ear and out the other, Dave, like, because like I just couldn't. The biggest thing, like, I couldn't reflect back or appreciate how far I've come because I was just so hard myself.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Were you ever bullied when you were overweight?
No, I wasn't. Being quite honest, I was never bullied, but always a bit conscious, like, I guess always a little bit conscious, like, where, changing clothes in the gym or in the change room, rugby and stuff, someone might say something and it might affect you just to crack, like, but you'd always think about it the next day. So it always is going to affect you, like, regardless. And that's just the truth of it, and I was so conscious of myself then, like, just like reminiscing back was, going on them nights out in college at the time, like, I used to wear an Under Armour top underneath the shirt, like, or underneath the t-shirt. And I couldn't go out without that, Dave. Like, that's the truth. I was like, if I don't have that washed, like, I'm not going out. Like, that was like my male corset to like keep everything in, if that made sense. But like, that was my mindset. And I want to be totally honest about that, because that was the truth. If I didn't have that, I wouldn't go out,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't socialize, or it was just my way of feeling like that, oh, I'm okay now, I don't look as bad, which is, it's fucking nuts when you think about it.
Yeah, no, it is. And stuff like that can really, really stick to you. And like what people think is a joke at the time, or just lads banter or whatever, like you don't realize how much it can play on your mind. Like I know it's two completely different situations, but I remember when I was growing up, like I think people they look for anything different in someone to kind of make themselves feel normal. And if kind of pointing stuff like that out in front of their friends, it just kind of it normalizes them, but it plays on your mind. Like when I was growing up, obviously I'm half Chinese, and that's kind of
Yeah,
what I put up with it. Like when I was growing up, a lot of kind of like racial um it was racism, like, and
yeah.
I think when you're kids and stuff, you can kind of play it off, and it doesn't really affect you. But it's only after I grew up and kind of thinking back on those situations, you realize how much it actually shapes your way of thinking, your own personal opinion of yourself, your actions, like everything. It can make a huge difference.
Absolutely,
So
100%, Dave. Like, just add in there, like, it's what happens during them times when you're younger will affect you for if you don't hit them dead on. Like, like even when I, got in shape and was, I thought the answer was having a six pack, for example. I was still like used to think twice without taking my top off,
mm,
till I actually, and that was just more of a, a mindset thing more than anything, because I had that remembrance of Jesus with my top off when I wasn't in shape or whatever. And like, truthfully, like, I just forgot to add in there is like, it's funny enough, like when I started my journey at 136 or 138 at the time, I didn't take any topless photo till I was 84 kilos, believe it or not.
mm,
So like I
yeah,
actually lost 50 kilos before I took my first topless photo. And that does tell you where my mindset was. I couldn't look at myself, or I didn't want to look at myself. And I'm sick and I didn't know, to be honest about
yeah,
it. But,
yeah.
I just tell you where the mindset was at the time.
Yeah, yeah, no, I get, man. Do you know what? I'm actually the exact same with my skin. Like,
Yeah,
obviously, kind of posting about it now, and I'm actually looking for photos of like when it was at its worst and stuff, and there's none.
yeah,
Like, I don't have any.
yeah,
There's only kind of like
100%.
ones that I'm doing bodybuilding poses and stuff. But yeah, I can definitely get that. So you mentioned there that you were on like 800 calories, doing cardio and stuff, and obviously you're a coach now. Looking back, like how would you do that differently? Because obviously it's very easy for me to say to a client who's overweight or something, go do this, 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 but I don't understand what it feels like to be that overweight. I don't understand so what would your steps be for someone in a situation like that?
So being honest, like why I'm coaching today is because of going through the rights and wrongs that I've done throughout my life and throughout my
Mm,
own journey, right? Being honest. So like what I would have done differently at the time was, I lost weight in 15 months, but the first 6 months I should have actually started using the gym, and I
mm,
should actually really, fed myself into it instead of actually cutting calories. But that was all through an experience as well, Dave, where, I lost my first 4 stone with a semi-private PT place, and I started kind of on like 1,500 calories or so. So like I kind of had I suppose a bad first experience straight away, and I thought that was the calories I had to be on. And
mm,
my first kind of feeling of fear, and I know people who listen to this will understand this, is where I lost 4 stone and I was extremely happy, and I said, geez, I'll take a week off, like like just a week off. It was like I lost like 4 stone in 16 weeks or so, and I just went back to eat normal. I had one takeaway on the weekend, I remember, and then I was just eating normal food throughout the week. And I was up at the end of the week, I was up like 5 to 6 kilos. I was like, what the hell? I was like, what's after happening? And
mm,
that was my first initial like start of like fearing, do I have to be on a diet for the rest of my life? I know there's
mm,
people going to be listening to say that, oh geez, I always have to be on a diet. If I don't, it spiral back. But that's actually not the answer. And I guess through my own experience, like this is a learning curve more than anything. And like you said, it's very hard to, resonate with people that haven't experienced that. And I remember like walking past in the gyms in Dubai, going to like the 6 spin classes a week. And my brother like lost 3 stone himself at the time. And he was like, Dave, he actually got me into the gym at the very start, believe it or not. He was always saying to me, you start lifting weights, and it'll help you so much. And if I actually did, Dave, the first 6 months, my body would look totally different to where it was you know, where it was at the
Yeah.
time at 84 kilos. And that's the truth. Like, so there's a process to it, you know. So I was, for me, doing it the wrong way, and like that's the experience that's priceless as well. You know, like you can't learn that stuff in the book. That's the truth of it, and that's why like I'm here to fast track clients that were once like me to get better quicker. You know, and that's just the truth of it.
Yeah, yeah, it's very interesting. But and what made you make that change to come out like yeah? So like being that overweight, was there like a certain moment that made it click, or what was it?
So basically, like I said, going home from the nights out, you know, like at the start of that college year, I remember like starting the ag science course after, you know, that would have been my initially second year, you could say, because I dropped out the first course. Was like, you know, I was 22 stone that time, starting a new college year, meeting new people, etc. And, you know, coming home from them social events and feeling so fucking low, man, that started to give me the realization, you know, that this is not the answer. I'm actually not happy. You know, I'm not happy with my lot where I used to have that mindset that I was. And like I said, I was extremely close to my sister, and I was just like, sat down, I was like, you know, what would she think? You know, what would she think if I told her this? If I was sitting down in front of her and I told her, she'd be extremely upset, you know, about it, and she wouldn't want me to do it. And that's what changed it, you know, and that's the truth of it.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. And where, so with your coach now at the moment, would you be more mindset, or are you more physique with this kind of stuff? Because you seem very tuned in with the mindset side of things. Like, so if you were having a conversation with your clients and stuff, like, would you, what are your first steps for someone who comes to you?
So straight off the bat, like I think it's from my own experience and where I've been through the last, you know, 8 to 10 years, is it's important to change the mind along with the body. You know, where for me, my own experience, I just changed the body. I done the training, I done the food, I done the photo shoots. Never changed the mindset because it was never taught that way. You know, so the initial steps is having that awareness and just giving the visualization to, you know, most people that come to me, you know, haven't self-confidence, or they can't see it move forward because they probably, you know, have experienced, you know, bad experience before, or was on a quick fix plan and all the weight came back on, for example. You know, what we have to do is to make it fit around their life firstly, and to make them appreciate how far they've come. It doesn't matter if they're in the course, in a program a week, 2 weeks, you have to appreciate, because the biggest thing that I missed out and through my own journey, Dave, was like reflection and appreciation. If I actually reflected back on everything I'd done and appreciated everything, and that visualization of how that would feel, instead of just, you know, the good thing I'd say, even though I hadn't a clue where my mindset is the whole time, was I was extremely good to set goals. Like I fucking set goals, got to this goal, then got to this goal, and it was like every like segments of 3 months, for example. And I just wrote write it down. And when I get there, I feel like great. And it never felt great, right? The reality of it, when you do actually, for even me and my clients now, is we have to actually visualize at how that feels. So like a perfect example is, we're coming to Christmas, right? I always say to any of my clients, we actually mini plan firstly. So firstly we do a 3-month plan, and then we do a mini plan, so every month, right? And we do it every week as well. But where do you want to be in 4 weeks? So for example, we have a lady, she's a Christmas party coming up the 16th of December, the 19th of December, whatever it is. And she has a dress there and she really wants to fit into. And I was like, right, you wrote that down, that's her goal. So instead of just writing down, say, oh yeah, I can't wait to fit into that dress, I'm like, you have to visualize, like, how does that feel? Like when you put that dress on, when you look at yourself in the mirror, how is that going to feel? You know, when you see your other half and his jaw hits the fucking ground, coming back up and hits him in the face, how is that going to feel? You know, like that's the thing. Like you have to like visualize that feeling, because, and just say when you come to the bar and you see your friends and they're blown away by how you look great in your dress, how is that going to feel when you get that? You know, and that's the most important, because on that night when that happens, you would appreciate that so much, and that'll be a huge milestone in your journey. And that's something that I never done. And that's what we do. Like, that's just a small example, for example. But you have to appreciate and visualize where you are and where that goal is. Because if you just tick boxes, oh yeah, I want to lose 4 stone, I want to feel better, more confidence, it's all surface level. That's the truth. You have to give you that visualization to move forward and make this like a full lifestyle change, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think like it's just so interesting to kind of hear stories like this. Obviously you're a coach, I'm a coach. We have two
Yeah,
completely different backgrounds, two completely different, upbringings. And, from the outside looking in, I'd say everyone just sees like, oh, online coach. But this is why it's important to do your research, look into the person, and, you know, pick someone who you're
absolutely,
going
man.
to gel with. And this is what's so frustrating about the industry is because, you get people who are not in it for the wrong reasons, but the people who are just like they just want to look good on Instagram, flash their abs and stuff like that. But majority of people won't be able to connect to someone like that on an emotional level. And I think like this way, like if anyone's ever asking me for advice about being an online coach as well, like I always say to people like people will buy into you for your personality more than you the coach and stuff. And I think it's funny with when people are doing coaching and stuff, everyone has it backwards. Like they kind of not everyone has it backwards, but like all you like people think you only need to be posting like information transformations,
Yeah,
you train and all this kind of stuff. But like that's not what's going to draw people in. It's kind of what you put out there as you being yourself, you being a normal person. um
absolutely, absolutely. Like it's funny, like the physical aspect and the physical change is only a byproduct of everything, man. And that's the
mm,
truth. Like, and like the majority of my clients stay with me from 12 to 18 months because they see the value that we do. It's not just the meal plan, the training plan. There's so much more to it. And being quite honest, Dave, I think that's what's needed to get that lifestyle change, to get that confidence and set belief in themselves to do it by themselves. Like I always say to anyone who comes on board, and they always, like you said, they always come on for the surface level. Geez, I want to lose 2 stone, or I want to feel better, and it's fucking like it's so surface level. Then you go into the chat, and then you really go deep, and you're like, holy mother of God, like this guy, I need this guy, and that's the reality,
yeah.
because they only see the surface level of it, and
mm,
that's the reality of it. So it's funny, but like it's brilliant that we all do come from two different sides, and what we promote in our program. But people always looking from the outside. There's only so much you can do, and that's why for me, like go jumping on here, and like I'm going to try and do an awful lot more of this, as well as like if you watch my social media, you will see that this isn't for someone that wants to have a six pack. Like I
mm,
put my hand up and say, I don't want bodybuilders. I don't want someone with short-term goals. I put my hand up because they're not my people, and that's just the truth of it.
mm,
I want people that I can see myself in, that I get fulfillment every day of coaching, and I want to be a part of that journey, and that's the truth of it. And that's what makes me get up every morning. Like,
yeah.
and it's actually changing someone's life.
Yeah.
100%. So no, it's funny. It's funny when you talk about it like that, because as we know, like the fitness industry is saturated, man,
mm,
saturated. So it's look, the people that can really buy into it, and the people that really buy into you, like people buy people all the time. That's why I put as much about myself and vulnerability, and I'm open. I don't care. Like it is what it is,
mm,
but because they're the people that you want, and that's just
yeah.
the truth of it.
Yeah, and I think that's like in general kind of what people want to see is authenticity and vulnerability and all stuff like that. Like, and it's funny kind of when you're looking at people and they feel like they need to just be like this rock solid, hardcore gym person to be getting to
Yeah,
people. And again, like that will draw in a certain crowd and that. But if you want to kind of really connect with your clients on an emotional level and kind of have a relationship with them, like you need to show these things. Not you need to show these things, but I think it is a lot more coaches would benefit from showing this vulnerable side. But at the same time, like
yeah.
it's not easy to do. It's not easy to do, man. You open yourself up to a lot of criticism and stuff like that. But even that kind of stuff shapes you into who you are.
Yeah, 100%. Like, and like the biggest thing that Joe resonates to us, Dave, we've all learned something from an experience, and
Mm,
you're on your own journey from your experience. I'm on this journey, from my own experience, and you're here to teach and, educate and inspire as much as we can. You like the reality of it. Like, I don't, like, I'm after doing a couple of photo shoots and all that, but, whatever, you won't see many of that stuff on my page because it doesn't resonate with my clients. Because
mm,
when I was fucking 21 stone and I saw someone like rip the shreds on some fucking, after doing a photo shoot, like I'd be saying to myself, honest to God, I was like, another life, Dave. It's not going to happen.
mm,
It's not going to happen, man. So I couldn't even resonate with that stuff. And that's why
mm.
I keep it very slate. I don't put any of that stuff where you see guys putting topless photos up every fucking day of the week, right? And all that. And they're the people I don't want to attract, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely brilliant, Dave. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing that. So I think there's a lot of benefit that can be taken from that conversation. Do you want to plug
Absolutely.
your social media? just before we
Yeah,
jump
so
off?
100%, man. So it's Dave_Kennedy_fitness. So Dave Kennedy coaching. You'll find on the website as well.
Spot on. Dave, thank you so much for coming on to have the chat.
Absolutely, man. Thank you very much.
Right.